Hello everyone. Enjoy these relaxing moments while you watch.
His wife was embarrassed by her husband and introduced him as a gardener at work. Many years later, Joe was born as the eldest son in a family that was extremely discriminatory and often made comparisons. Early on, he realized that he wasn't the child his parents had hoped for. The burden of not being the top student weighed heavily not only on him but also on his mother, who endured harsh criticism from the family. The rejection didn't stop there. His mother, in a moment of sadness and disappointment, blamed Joe for the family's troubles. When his twin brother became the school's top student a year later, the differences became even more pronounced. The younger brother became the family's center of attention, receiving love and care, while Joe only knew bitter loneliness. He grew up believing it was his duty to forego good things for his brother's benefit. New clothes, delicious food, and even the comfort of a warm blanket during the cold winter nights, all of it went to his brother. Meanwhile, Joe curled up on a bed with a thin mattress, covered by old, worn-out blankets. When it was time for high school, his brother was enrolled in a prestigious, private, and quite expensive school. Joe didn't dare dream of such a privilege. Bitterness grew within him. Yet, he harbored an unyielding thirst for knowledge. With unprecedented determination, he begged his father to allow him to continue studying. But his pleas only brought laughter and scorn. "Why waste money on someone who's not outstanding?" his father said, clearly showing his bias. "Isn't the fact that you made it to middle school enough for you to be grateful for the rest of your life? Now, work to support your talented brother, understand?" His father's words were blunt and hurtful, but despite the rejection, Joe never stopped dreaming and fighting for a future he could choose for himself. Despite his father's harsh words, at 16, Joe found work at a textile factory. He split his time between the exhaustion of working during the day and secretly studying at night, away from his family's judgmental eyes. Books became his silent friends, and the knowledge he gained was his secret weapon. Studying wasn't a crime, but in his family's space, each page he read felt like a small act of rebellion against what they expected of him. Joe fought for 3 years with every ounce of strength he had. By day, he worked tirelessly in the factory, and by night, he studied with care and focus. All that effort paid off when, at the age of 20, he passed the equivalent of the high school graduation exam. It was entirely his own doing, without help or support from anyone, fueled solely by his unwavering will to move forward. With this achievement, Joe changed. He decided he would no longer accept being treated as inferior just because he wasn't his brother. One quiet night, he left home, seeking freedom and beginning a life of his own. It was 20 years of silent struggle, but he chose an independent and equal life over continuing in bitterness. Living alone was not easy, and in the early stages of this new life, Joe found work at a restaurant. There, he gradually became close and eventually married Alexandra, the restaurant owner's only daughter, a girl on her way to university. Alexandra was the first person to genuinely praise him, touching his heart, and soon, their bond blossomed into love. They dated for less than a year and decided to marry in secret, then moved into Joe's small apartment. But the marriage couldn't stay secret for long. When Alexandra's father, also Joe's boss, found out about the marriage, he was shocked and furious. He confronted Joe with anger. "I hired you because I felt sorry for you, and you dared to marry my daughter behind my back." His voice trembled with rage. "Do you think I'll accept this and let you join my family after this? No way. Get out, and forget about your salary. You've only brought trouble to us. My daughter could be with the finest young men at the university, building a successful future, not stuck with someone as unworthy as you." Frightened, Joe replied, "Sir, I didn't seduce your daughter. We just fell in love." "You're from a different world," he retorted. "You and Alexandra don't belong together, and I won't rest until you're out of her life." Joe stood there, shocked by the words and the bitterness of the situation. Before he could argue, Alexandra's father fired him without giving him the wages he deserved. Later, her father stormed into their apartment, blinded by rage, destroying everything in sight. Joe remained calm until Alexandra arrived and saw the chaos. "Dad, that's enough. I also chose to marry, it wasn't just Joe," she interjected, gently taking her husband's hand. "We're having a child, you're going to be a grandfather." He paused momentarily but soon flared up again with fresh accusations. "Alexandra, are you out of your mind?" He doubted every word. She looked at her father with a resolute gaze and confidently stated, "I love Joe, we're going to be a happy family." Hearing this, her father collapsed to the floor, pounding it in frustration and shouting, "How could you do this? You had a bright future, and now you're throwing away everything we've sacrificed for you. You ungrateful child." Joe realized that he was in a marriage shadowed by his father-in-law's resentment. Alexandra promised that when things got better, they would have a real wedding. Despite their financial struggles, Joe told his wife, "I'm happy with the life we have, I'll do my best for you and our child." His words were sincere, but deep inside, he felt he was masking some worry. Alexandra's father eventually reconsidered. He couldn't bear the thought of his grandchild growing up in poverty. He decided to let Joe and Alexandra move in with him. Out of concern for his wife, Joe divided his time between helping her with chores and laboring at the restaurant. His father-in-law constantly complained, scolding him, saying he was only good for menial tasks and was a liability with anything important. Joe endured all of this for over 6 years. Sometimes, he felt sad, wondering why he had to go through all this humiliation. Yet, he found comfort in his wife, who was his anchor, holding his hand with love and reassuring him. Joe's life turned upside down when his father-in-law, deceived by a fraudulent investment scheme, lost all his savings. In desperation, he lamented, "How could he do this to me? My entire life's savings, all my money, gone." Alexandra, equally desperate, asked, "Dad, how could you fall for this? What are we going to do now?" Joe tried to calm the situation. "Alexandra, calm down. Your father didn't mean to, he was tricked. And look, it's not much, but I have some savings. With that, we can rent a small basement apartment. So, don't be hard on him." However, his father-in-law grew angrier and snapped, "How dare you talk to my daughter like that? This is all your fault. If you weren't such a lowly man from the outskirts, we wouldn't be in this mess, we'd have a decent place to go to." Joe might have reacted with anger to such harsh words, but instead, he felt a profound sadness. He had a daughter to care for and couldn't let his emotions get the better of him. Using his savings, Joe rented a small basement apartment, determined to build a new life for him and his family. After a while, Joe's father-in-law fell ill, and his wife had to work to improve their financial situation. Joe didn't stay idle either, he began taking on multiple jobs to help with finances and used every spare moment to care for their daughter to ease his wife's burden. They had been fighting this struggle for over 10 years. Their daily battle for survival was so exhausting that the love his wife once had for him had long faded. Even so, Joe had grown accustomed to this difficult life, thinking that if he could raise his daughter in the best way possible, he would be ready to face any obstacle. Whenever his daughter needed or wanted something, he did everything he could to provide it, even if it meant going hungry himself. Joe's father-in-law never missed an opportunity to express his discontent. "Don't you think you're spoiling her? You should pay more attention to your wife instead of sacrificing everything for the girl." Joe replied firmly, "I'm certain my wife agrees with me. We're both working day and night to provide the best for our daughter, and that's something you, as her grandfather, should also appreciate." His father-in-law responded with a tone full of disdain. "How dare you speak to me like that? We're only here because your family is poor and deprived." Unfazed by the threat, Joe retorted, "As far as I remember, we're in this situation because you were scammed." After Joe's words, his father-in-law became enraged and started breaking things around the house. Joe then picked up his daughter and left until his father-in-law decided to abandon his childish, unnecessary behavior. After his fit of anger, Joe's father-in-law pretended to be weak and went to lie down, hoping to stir up sympathy from his daughter when she returned from work. Moreover, Alexandra, who had always sided with Joe, began criticizing him for not properly taking care of her father. "My father said you were rude to him, and I really didn't expect that from you." Feeling wronged, Joe quickly responded. "Alexandra, I wasn't rude to your father. He doesn't miss a chance to put me down and criticize me for anything, and we're only in this situation because of him." She tried to ease the tension in a softer tone. "All right, Joe, given my father's health, you need to be more patient." This only drove them further apart. Despite the challenges, Joe remained committed to caring for his family and his marriage, and through his hard work, he finally managed to buy a new house when his daughter was in high school. While moving, his father-in-law belittled Joe's contributions, claiming that this accomplishment was solely due to Alexandra. "You should be grateful for my daughter's efforts. Even though she married you, she has overcome adversity and lifted us out of the hole you put us in." Joe knew that his hard work played a significant role in buying the house, but he chose to keep that thought to himself as he arranged their new home. Accustomed to his father-in-law's undervaluation and rudeness, Joe shielded himself from those insults but still hoped things would get better. However, that hope began to waver as his marriage started to crumble. It began when Alexandra took a demanding job in insurance sales. "You know, Joe, my colleagues at the office will be meeting to go over some things," she said. "Again?" "This is the fourth meeting this week," Joe replied in a skeptical tone. "You need to understand that we have a lot of new clients at the company, and they need my advice," Alexandra concluded. But Joe knew that these meetings involved going out, dining, and being around other men. He felt awful when she didn't come home and stayed out all night. Every time he brought up his discomfort with her behavior, Alexandra would get angry. "Joe, can't you thank me just once for the efforts I'm making for this family? Because you never got wealthy, it only makes me want to work even more. You keep yourself buried in the kitchen and looking after our child, hardly like a husband at all." Alexandra's harsh words cut Joe deeply. After all, he had given the best years of his life to this family. That difficult night, after hearing her hurtful comments, he went into the bathroom and splashed water on his face, not even knowing if it was water or tears soaking his face. One morning, after Alexandra had gone out with friends the night before, she woke up and went to work while still a bit hungover. A few hours later, she called Joe, speaking with a commanding tone. "Joe, are you working today or at home? I need you to bring me the contract I left at home. It's on the bedside table, I need it in 10 minutes, so hurry." Joe barely had time to dress properly. He grabbed the contract, called a taxi, which he rarely did, and rushed to his wife's office. When he arrived, he anxiously asked about his wife and saw Alexandra approaching with a look that seemed to be one of shame over his less-than-stylish appearance. "Joe, what are you wearing? Do you want to embarrass me to death?" At that moment, a well-dressed woman approached them, drawing Alexandra's attention. "What are you doing here? Don't you have an important contract to sign? The company's boss we've been waiting for has already arrived." "Yeah, I know, I'm on my way and bringing the contract," Alexandra said, trying to remain calm but clearly nervous. "You forgot the contract at home, didn't you?" "Here," Joe said, still not fully understanding the situation. She took the document without acknowledging his words, and when others asked, "Is that your husband?" Alexandra replied without any hesitation. "Who?" "No, he's just my gardener." Joe felt as if he had been stabbed in the heart. He was dismissed as a husband and introduced as nothing more than a gardener. Afterward, she left him and returned to her work without a hint of regret. Joe stood there, unable to believe what had just happened, listening to his wife's conversation with her colleagues in the next room. "You must be rich, huh, with a gardener. I almost mistook him for your husband," one friend said. "Are you crazy? How could I live with someone so worthless? My husband is very busy because he works for a huge company and drives a very expensive car. Look at that gardener's outfit and hair, how could he be my husband, she replied, as her colleagues continued. Yeah, he's just your gardener. Besides, he's definitely not your type. But come on, you need to secure that contract to get promoted to manager. Your husband would be so proud of you. The truth was that Joe was completely shattered. He returned home in tears and, as if in a trance, stopped by a clothing store and spent the day buying several new outfits to try to feel better. When he got home, Alexandra criticized him mercilessly. You embarrassed me at work. You don't look classy, you can't even afford a car. How could you confidently call me your wife in front of everyone like that, she said, showing her complete lack of respect for him. She continued to mock him, saying he looked like a poor gardener. His father-in-law joined the argument. My daughter is absolutely right. Look at you, dressed like someone from a lower class, you're exactly where your abilities lie. At the very least, you should try to be worthy of our Alexandra. Joe felt such intense anger and despair that his body trembled. He was used to the way Alexandra's family treated him, but there was a limit to what he could endure, especially in front of his daughter. He always remembered the saying that children often live the lives of those closest to them, and Joe's greatest fear was that his daughter would have a future as bleak as his own. Suddenly, as if it were the simplest thing in the world, Alexandra said. Joe, enough. I've tried to maintain this marriage as long as I could. I don't want anything more to do with you, I want a divorce. The truth is I've been seeing someone else, someone much more successful than you. He's the one I truly deserve. Joe was shocked at Alexandra's audacity. How can you boldly betray me and act as if you're right? He promised himself he would not leave the house, a home to which he had contributed 80% of its value. How could he simply allow others to take over everything he had worked so hard for? In a cruel act, his father-in-law threw Joe's clothes into the trash. You're standing in the way of my daughter's future, she's finally opened her eyes. You can't even provide her a comfortable life, she still has to work hard, he said. At that moment, Joe's daughter, who had just returned from school, witnessed this scene and, with tear-filled eyes, pleaded with her father not to let it happen. Why do you have to put up with this? You should leave Mom, the one who's cheating on you, and Grandma, who doesn't understand anything. Why do you endure so much? I can't stand seeing you accept all this, and I'll go with you. When his father-in-law heard what his granddaughter said, he raged. It's you who taught her to be so disrespectful, he accused Joe. Where did she learn this boldness? It was you teaching her secretly. His daughter, growing more furious, responded. I hate you. You only know how to belittle and despise my father, even though he is the main support of this family. Now you're just covering for Mom because you think some rich man will come and give you both a luxurious life. It won't happen, Grandpa, you and Mom should stop dreaming of things that aren't real. Then, his father-in-law, in an annoyed voice, said. This insolent child, you don't deserve to be my bloodline. Joe cut in, shouting. I'm not going anywhere, and neither is Sophia. This house is ours as much as it's yours, we won't be driven out for mistakes we didn't commit. Alexandra seemed about to reply, but Joe didn't let her continue. Enough. Let's end this. We'll settle this divorce as quickly as possible, and you don't deserve to be a mother. A betrayer like you cannot be trusted to raise my daughter. But listen, he said. My daughter and I will only leave this house if you give me 80% of its value. Otherwise, I'll find a lawyer right away to settle this in court. Alexandra responded. But you're really greedy, aren't you? With anger in his eyes, Joe replied. This isn't greed, it's my right, as I contributed 80% of the house's value. He concluded with a mocking tone. You're right to demand a divorce after cheating, and I'm right to demand my fair share. Do that, and you won't have any trouble with me legally. His father-in-law interjected. Don't worry about his threats, dear. Just throw him out along with that foolish child right away. Now that you're starting a new family, you need to get rid of them. In the midst of the heated argument, Sophia confronted her mother. Mom, I won't accept this. I could go to your work and tell everyone who you really are. This threat made Alexandra realize the seriousness of her actions, and she shouted. How dare you talk to me like that, you insolent child? My biggest regret is having an ungrateful daughter like you. Joe, feeling his daughter's pain, cut in. Don't talk to Sophia like that. She's too disappointed in you, he replied, standing up for his daughter's dignity. Alexandra, who had believed that Joe would comply when signing the divorce papers, was surprised by his determination and hadn't expected him to demand his share before signing anything. Contrary to everyone's expectations, that very night, she transferred the money as promised into his account. After the divorce, Joe went through a long period of sadness, but he knew he needed to find a way to earn money consistently to support himself and pay for Sophia's education. So, he turned to a culinary vocational school, hoping to become a chef quickly, thinking he could both earn a good income and cook delicious meals for Sophia. In the following months, he threw himself into studying and practicing, eventually landing a job at a renowned restaurant. He poured his heart into his work, and his dedication and attention to detail soon earned him a reputation for excellence. One day, the company's manager called him in for a conversation. Normally, I wouldn't do this with someone new, he said. But you're an exception. We have a very particular client who has criticized our top 10 employees. I've thought of recommending you. All you'd have to do is cook daily for this client. The pay will be triple what you're currently earning. Do you accept? Needing money to cover the upcoming university expenses for Sophia, Joe didn't hesitate to accept the offer. Upon arriving at this particular client's home, while thinking about the amount he would earn, Joe felt it was an unusually high sum for such a short-term task. With that thought in mind, he wrote a detailed note and left it for the homeowner. In the note, he mentioned that if she wanted any special dish, she could just leave a note in the fridge, and he would prepare it for her. Isabel, the homeowner, was always absent while Joe worked, so they rarely met. Contrary to Joe's initial worries, she never expressed any dissatisfaction. He continued to do his job diligently, going above and beyond to ensure his high salary was well deserved. One typical day, while tidying up, Joe noticed a day circled on Isabel's calendar. There was a reminder that didn't match any of his usual workdays, making him wonder about its significance and whether he needed to prepare something special for the occasion. Perhaps she was planning to host someone at her home. Inspired by the thought that he should prepare for the upcoming event, Joe decided to spend the night before, though busy with other tasks, preparing food in the kitchen, which had become his happy sanctuary. He lost track of time while cooking, immersed in the joy of preparing food with all his heart. Just as he was focused on cooking, the homeowner returned. Startled to realize he had lost track of time, Joe quickly explained. I'm sorry, I got so engrossed in cooking that I didn't realize how late it was. I'm almost done and will be out of here soon. By the way, have you eaten yet? Would you like me to set the table? No need, Isabel replied. But why did you cook so much? Joe answered. Oh, I noticed tomorrow is an important day on your calendar, so I thought I'd prepare this meal. He then realized she had brought in shopping bags, suggesting that she might have intended to cook for that day herself. With a mind full of suspicion, Joe didn't know what to do. Fortunately, or perhaps not, the homeowner didn't say anything further about it. All right, just tidy everything up and then you can leave, she said, then headed to her room. Joe lingered in the kitchen, filled with the aroma of delicious food and chaotic thoughts, trying to make sense of what had happened. He feared that the misunderstanding about the meal might cost him his job, but unexpectedly, he didn't receive any reprimand. With a heavy heart, he went to work the next day. But a delightful surprise awaited him. A note in the refrigerator read, "Thank you for the meal. That simple message filled him with happiness and, inspired by this unexpected gesture, Joe continued cooking with newfound enthusiasm. That's when he realized that this job might truly be right for him. The following day, after that small incident, when Joe arrived at work, he found a note asking him to reduce the portion sizes. This marked the beginning of a new form of communication through notes left here and there, with messages like, "The soup was delicious, please keep it warm until I return," and "Dinner was wonderful." Such messages gradually became more frequent. Joe began looking forward to his workdays with excitement, no longer fearing what he might have to prepare, and he found himself smiling more often. His daughter, Sophia, noticed these changes and asked, "Dad, are you dating someone?" "Oh, Sophia, what are you talking about?" Joe replied in surprise. "It's just that you seem happier than usual," Sophia observed. "Oh, come on, I'm just happy with my work, what's so strange about that?" Joe said, trying to mask his discomfort. "All right, then," Sophia replied, still a bit skeptical. One morning, Joe arrived at work to find that Isabel seemed to have caught the flu. Although feeling unwell and staying home, she said, "Don't worry, it's just a mild flu. You should head home to avoid catching it." But Joe, always concerned about others' well-being, couldn't leave his employer at home alone when she needed care. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. You are our biggest motivation to keep creating. Let us know where you're watching from so we can see how far this video has reached around the world. Don't forget to hit like if you found it interesting, and share it with your friends too. So, he went to the nearby pharmacy, bought some flu medicine, and returned to prepare a nourishing chicken soup for her. Before leaving, he left a note in the refrigerator, instructing her to take the medicine and eat the soup to recover quickly. The next day, Joe was surprised to find a nice shirt left for him as a thank you. He felt uncomfortable accepting such a gift and decided to wait for Isabel to return to discuss it. When she arrived home, she seemed surprised to see him still there, as she thought he had already left. He started the conversation. "Look, I really appreciate this gift, but I don't feel comfortable accepting it, and I don't want you to think I don't value this thoughtful gesture. Please, Joe, accept it. It's my way of thanking you for the care you've shown me, and the meals you prepare are always so delicious," she insisted. "I'm glad you enjoy them." "It's always a pleasure to cook for you," Joe replied gently. "Look, although the food is wonderful, it doesn't have the same taste when eaten alone. I miss the warmth of family, something I haven't experienced in a long time," she shared with a hint of sadness. After a moment of thought, Joe responded, "I completely understand. Food has a special flavor when shared." With a bit of excitement, she suggested, "That's why. I was thinking, would you like to have dinner with me one of these days?" Surprised but honored, Joe replied, "That would be different. It's been a long time since I've sat down for dinner with a woman since my divorce. But I think I'll accept your invitation." And when they finally sat down for dinner together, the conversation flowed naturally. During dinner, Joe discovered that the day marked on the calendar was a reminder of the anniversary of Isabel's mother's passing, not a romantic date as he had previously thought. "I never married, you know," she shared. "I'm your age, but I've been through many challenges in my youth." "That must have been difficult," he commented. "It was, and over the years, I realized that many men were interested in me only for my wealth. That made me choose to live a solitary life," Isabel continued. With empathy, Joe said, "I'm sorry for those experiences." Isabel continued, "Losing my mother was the hardest time, that's when I deeply felt the lack of family." "I can't imagine how you managed to face that alone," Joe said. Then, she shifted the subject slightly. "What about your ex-wife? Would she mind if we had dinner together?" Joe sighed before answering. "Oh, my ex-wife. We divorced after she cheated on me. So, no, she has no right to interfere in this." In the days that followed, Joe found a note from Isabel inviting him to dinner more frequently. Then, one morning, he was startled by the ringing of the phone. It was Isabel. Joe feared for a moment that it might be a call to fire him, but she wanted to talk about something more personal. "Joe, you know, I'm not sure what you'll think, but I need to confess my feelings. After meeting you and learning your story, I started feeling something I'd never felt before. Ms. Isabel, as someone who was once married, I no longer believe in never. We begin with good feelings toward each other, but people can change over time, and you may regret it in the future, just as my ex-wife did," Joe replied. "No, I'm not young anymore, and I've experienced enough to know when I see a man who always thinks of his family, always shows love and kindness, and never stops trying to give his loved ones the best life possible. It's just that your ex-wife hadn't experienced enough, so she missed out on the best man. I'm certain she will regret it, but it's too late," Isabel said. "What I'm saying is that I have genuine feelings for you and deeply appreciate your kindness. I'm feeling something I've never felt with anyone before. I truly hope you and your daughter could become part of my family." "That's something I need to think about," Joe said. "I'm serious. I want to start a new life with you," Isabel replied. Joe, still hesitant, said, "I'm afraid of facing heartbreak again." Sophia, trying to encourage him, said, "Dad, you deserve real happiness." Moved by Sophia's words, Joe felt emotional. After a moment of reflection, he replied, "I agree. I agree to get to know you and start dating you, Ms. Isabel." From then on, with Isabel's support and his own intelligence and effort, Joe embarked on a business journey with her and quickly achieved significant success. "See, Joe, I knew you were incredibly capable, it's just that you hadn't found the right place until now. Now you've unlocked all your extraordinary potential, you're truly sharp in business," Isabel said enthusiastically. "No, it's all because I'm lucky, Isabel. I feel so lucky to have met you. Since I was young, I was always looked down upon as someone worthless, making me doubt myself. In my entire life, you're the only one who has believed in me, helped me, and encouraged me when I wasn't doing well, never once looking down on me. Why are you so wonderful, Isabel?" Joe said, on the verge of tears. The two embraced emotionally, vowing to strive together for Sophia's future and for their future children as well.
If you enjoyed this story, we invite you to give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Your support motivates us to keep bringing heartwarming stories almost every day. We are very grateful for your support. See you soon.